The World Tomorrow. The Worldwide Church of God presents Herbert W. Armstrong.
I'm not here to cram anything down your throat. It will happen, and when it happens, you will know that God or Allah sent a messenger here to tell you this, because I am his servant.
He said, God is going to do a new thing among the people of God, even in the Crusade Church of God in Russellville, something like he has never done before. If we're going to be that great and mighty people, such as the world has never seen, nor shall again, that's a new thing. What good is it if you're comfortable and God isn't?
And there has been many, many false churches. Jesus said, I will build my church. He didn't say, I will build my churches. But there is a true church that is undeceived.
And that we can be a people where the blood of Christ can flow from us into their open wounds to heal them and bring them into the wedding chamber.
Hello and welcome back to the Cult Next Door podcast. I am Maddie Lasser, joined by my sister Ashley Teeter as always, and we are once again joined by our brother-in-law Blake Moore. Those of you who are avid listeners of the podcast, you will remember him from, I think it was 19 or 20 episodes ago that he was last on. I think in November we recorded, so we're having him back today to kind of talk about the things that we didn't cover the last time. So Blake, thank you so much for traveling all the way back up and joining us again.
Thanks for having me again. It feels wrong to say, like, I'm glad to be here. It's fun chatting with you guys, because it's rough stuff, right? But I was telling Ashley before we started, like, I'm super appreciative of the podcast because I know most of the people that are on it, but still there's something to, we all lived a similar experience, but you're keeping how it's affecting you inside, like everyone personally for themselves. So like, it's been super helpful for me in my journey, walking out of it all and processing things and dealing with just the crap that is difficult. Hearing, like Sandy come on last week and be vulnerable with this has been, messing with my mind. Like it's confusing and it's painful. And so, no, I'm really appreciative of the podcast. I'm happy to be back. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. And we were also talking earlier when we were having coffee that when we talk about these things and we bring them to light and they've been in the dark places in our minds and in our bodies, I think that is a key to the healing process.
100%.
That kind of kickstarts it to speak it and put it in the light. And then what happens with that is kind of the loss of shame. At least it's been that way for me.
Definitely. No, that resonates with me for sure.
Yeah. And it's very validating because you're just like, okay, this thing that I've told myself for so long, it wasn't really that bad, or comparative to this other person's experience, it wasn't that extreme. Like, we tell ourselves all these things that kind of rationalize away the trauma, but the reality is like these are still traumas.
Or just like the frustration of the grappling with the ups and downs of trying to heal and process through it, where you can be beside yourself with like, I can't believe how many years has gone by and I'm still struggling with this, or it feels worse now, this part of it, than it did 3 years ago. It definitely is validating and helpful to just be a little bit more collective in that sense and have it out there.
Yeah, and to understand that, like, we just had Dr. Laura Anderson on the podcast, and, in her book, When Religion Hurts You, she talks about healing as not being a linear process. And so just to understand that it's normal to go through the ups and downs, I think also helps. It makes it a little bit less discouraging. Everyone's going through the same thing, regardless of what they're dealing with. So, but we're super happy to have you here. And I think where we left off last time, we had talked about you married our sister, Sarah, and came into the Lassiter family, and you talked about those dynamics within the family that you began to see and experience yourself as a member of the family that you didn't see quite fully before. And then we touched on your disillusionment, and how that started and the progression of that. But we didn't get into the events that really started in 2019 that led to your actual real exit from the cult. And so I was hoping we could pick up there. If you could talk about, I know previous guests have talked about the love move, and I'd love to get your perspective on what that was like for you. And I know that plays a key part in your eventual exit. So could we start there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a huge part in the exit. And I guess I was on the outs. I didn't know it was the love move. I called it the movement. Feel free to jump in and ask me questions and offer further details, because I admit, like, a lot of things I remember very specifically and vividly. And I'm usually really, really good with details, but it's crazy. Like, the older I get, the longer I've had a young child, like, time fast forwards and you look back and it's like a blur now. Like, everything is like one big event with bits and pieces. But I remember, so slightly preceding this, is I'm probably not the best to elaborate on, would be some progressive involvement with flipping of houses as a renovation investment scheme for I don't know if I want to say Larry's name for Larry. David did a lot, didn't he?
Oh yeah, we have.
For your
It's
dad.
fine. I mean, he was a public.
Yeah, but in talking to you
facing
guys, I
figure.
normally say your dad. I never used his name.
Yeah.
That's actually a funny story. After Sarah and I got married, I can remember being around a lot more. And it's like, if I said something to him and he ignored me because he didn't give a shit or he didn't hear me, I didn't know how to get his attention to get him to say it again where he would listen to me, because I wasn't going to say, hey, Larry. And then I wasn't about the whole, hey, Big Daddy thing. And it always felt weird to me.
God, I have so many thoughts on that.
Could you have said, hey, reckoning?
Yeah. At that point, I didn't know he was the reckoning.
Yeah, we didn't know that
So, no. Yeah, so I didn't know how to get his attention. So I would just stop. Michael thinks this is hilarious. I would just because he would see it happen. He would be sitting next to me at dinner. And then I would just be like, yeah, I don't have anything to say. Just let that go. So anyway, yeah, so I feel like slightly preceding the movement would be what I remember being the big catalyst. So right before it, I think the flipping of houses was becoming like a bigger deal. And then this will tie in later, I think, but there was the young single mother in the church that your dad began spending a lot of time with flipping houses. And that was kind of an odd dynamic because, and again, there are people that have a better recollection of insight onto exactly what was happening with him at that time with this stuff. But there have been quite a few other members of the church that had worked with her on counseling. It's just some difficult stuff. I don't really know, to be honest. Like, I can't speak firsthand to it. But he had kind of like washed his hands of her. And like, I can't deal with this. You guys deal with it. And then all of a sudden, I remember it being like so bizarre to everyone. He was like the person to invest in her and cultivate, I don't know what, something, helping, right? Counseling and whatever. Yeah, I have no idea what was the intent or purpose there. Now I have, different theories, and it was so bizarre because we started seeing him behave like we'd never seen before. And again, like, I'm not that long into the family, getting closer to a decade.
And this is before he started talking about the love move or the love movement.
I'm 95% sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how I
Okay.
remember things, because this isn't like directly the start of the love movement, but to me it is a connecting data point that is immediately preceding it.
Right.
And so I'm not that long into the family at this point. I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 10 years, but like, I mean, I know him well enough that it's bizarre. I remember us just like shocked, everyone at the dinner table, you know, or the after, when he comes home and we hear a report of how like she's ripped his head off, like just dressed him down. Like I wasn't there. I mean, you might say it was a verbally abusive type scenario. I don't really remember what was said or what it was about. Like I have no clue, but it was off the wall to us that someone had spoken to him this way. And he was like, you know, you just got to be patient and love, like whatever. Because it was like, excuse me, like she still has a head on her shoulders, because anyone else that knows him, I mean, y'all are his children, right? Who better to know?
Absolutely.
Like you look at him with some disrespect or question him, like there's going to be hell to pay. There'll be serious consequences, right? So he's not a person that you disrespect. So I honestly, I don't have because I didn't really care that much at the time when that was going on. I don't know. I had my own problems I was dealing with. So I don't remember a whole lot more detail-wise what was going on with that early stage with her, except that there was just a lot of time spent together and it was unique. His behavior became more and more, it was just uncommon for him.
So you mentioned, you know, Dad would have these counseling sessions with this person, and we've mentioned her before. We've called her Sasha in previous episodes, the single mother that we're referring to. So you talked about kind of the counseling sessions that Dad would have with her, and more than a couple of times kind of Dad getting dressed down and getting his head taken off, so to speak, verbally, just kind of stuff that didn't really happen to Dad. And with Dad's reaction not being anything we had ever seen from him before, was that kind of your first inkling when you were kind of viewing this from the outside that something was different with this particular dynamic between the two of these people?
Yeah, absolutely. But I had zero scope of connection to that, to the bigger picture of what we're looking at now, right? Like fast forwarding into the de-evolution of the church with the escalation of the movement. So like I had no frame of reference for scope for what that might mean, but I definitely remember how strange it was that he almost seemed like trivial and like would laugh off like how hostile like she could be, and almost like it was endearing to him a little bit, and almost like not speaking to what's actually happening or the intent here, but like what you might like see like cliche wise in a movie of, I'm using the word couple loosely here, but like a couple that like hates each other for a minute, and like there's this passion element, and then like, but it's also awesome. You know what I mean? Like this, it was very odd. I remember that, but I also, you know, like I was telling you earlier, I didn't pay a lot of attention to it because it didn't seem like, it just seemed like a little bit more drama to me, honestly. And we had plenty of that type of stuff. Some of these conversations, like there was always something going on in a group this small, like the cult dynamic. I'm still noticing things pop up in me and remembering things of like what it was like to be in tight knit's not the right word. You know what I mean? That maybe enmeshed is, but just the group think where you're this, you know, cog in the wheel. And yeah, there was just a lot of, there's always some dramatic situation popping up that like somebody has to be in the corner talking about, and it's just a big deal. And I had, with some of it, I just had a little bit of my fill by this point, and I had my own life struggles that were challenging and having to face at the time. So I don't remember giving a great amount of weight to it, but I definitely remember thinking it was very strange.
So I remember kind of watching this happen, this dynamic between Dad and this person, and not making too much of it at the time, but noticing that it was different than anything I had ever experienced with Dad before. But I do remember there are 100 key moments that I could recall, but there was one with this particular person. I remember that Dad came home, I think, from a counseling session, if we want to call it that, whatever it was. And they had some kind of butting of the heads or something. I guess she had dressed him down or something akin to that. And I guess she had maybe messaged him, worried that she had upset him during that. And
Did he get the message like at family dinner that night? Like it seemed like it came through right around then.
Yeah, because I think I feel like I remember him telling this story from his chair. Yeah, with his phone. So I think maybe it was before like a Friday night dinner. So like the family is there in the house, we're all kind of getting ready, and which is something Dad liked to do. And so he was sharing this, I guess, the contents of this text from this person, and her worried that she had upset Dad, and he laughed it off. And I guess he had responded to her and said, like, as if you could ever upset me. And I remember thinking how strange that was, because as you can attest to, Ashley, like, you very much could make Dad angry. I did it probably as regularly as anybody.
And you could do it without having any idea how you've done it.
That's right.
Or he could just
your face.
He could just come in angry for the day.
Oh, for sure.
And I can't speak to it as you guys can. But like as a, what do you call it? Person in the church, a congregant, like whatever, sitting there, like the fear that you can experience as he's walking in, like you've got to read the room. Like, is he mad today? Or is he in a great mood? And then you're either relieved or you're nervous. Like it's...
Well, your life is revolving around making sure that you don't make him mad. So I can imagine how jarring it was to hear him respond that way.
Yeah.
Well, it was like jaw-dropping. It's like, well, that sounds nice. Like how
and a further illustration that like, okay, whatever exactly is going on over here with this person, it's definitely different. I don't know what it is. This is not what I experienced or ever have, or anybody I know that's close to Dad. So you knew it was different. You just didn't know what.
So that's a really great point to dovetail off of, because that became, and we should probably pin that and come back to it later and timeline wise, but that became such a big deal to Sarah, who I'm like intimately connected here with, like how everything is affecting her with her family more so than it is me, with through this movement process of that got worse and worse and worse. It was like, how the hell can he treat her like this when I've never seen a shred of that type of, well, I don't want to use these words exactly, but attention and affection, yes, affection and love, and not respect, but like a deference and a catering to, like where almost where it's like normal, like with a normal relationship where it's like, yeah, I mean, we could have a fight and we could get over it, or you could make me upset and I forgive you and I love you, but like there was no, from what we could see anyway, there was no hostility like from him towards her.
I think the word you used, I was trying to think of it too, is exactly right. There was a level of deference to her that no one
had ever seen,
had ever experienced.
Including your mom.
Yes, exactly.
Who, I mean...
Probably especially Mom.
Yeah, probably
right,
so.
Which is just mind-blowing when anyone knows your mom at like how faithfully she loved and devoted and served with like grace and, well... Now you might look at it and call it something more than grace, with like almost like a cowed, a subdued type of, you know what I mean? Submission, yeah, like with a level of submission and devotion to him, like from, well, to everyone, but to him, like, so to see the disparity there, that grew and grew and grew, and as the movement evolved, things, became more and more intricate and more obvious and more intense. But to see that disparity between your mom and this woman, or his own daughter and this woman, who, comes out later that, well, it came out later to me. Apparently it had been said long, long before, but became frequently said that the Lord said that she's my lineage. Like, she wasn't supposed to be born into this other family. She was supposed to be born to me. And so he's telling, Sarah and you and, your siblings that she's your sister. And I remember, like, at the time, like, I regret to say, I'm still pretty blinded with, he's God's prophet and he's got some spiritual revelation, like, all right, but like, it became increasingly painful, to put it lightly, to Sarah, watching him treat her this way and, like, essentially completely replace her and be treated better than, from what we were seeing anyway, better than you knew he had the capability of treating a person, right? Which is just insane. It's still insane when you think about that, when you start contrasting it with, well, everything else that you get into on the show here, right?
So when he started that, and you guys noticed, and there's that text where he's, saying that he could never be mad at her, that was the beginning of you guys all taking notice of this different relationship?
Give or take, yeah. I mean, it's...
Okay, and then how long was it until he was saying, well, actually, she's my daughter. There's a whole spiritual lineage component to this.
I feel like that stuff came really close to the origin of the movement beginning. Like, right before or right after.
He was spending...
Not talking about spending time with her, but saying the spiritual, like, he starts to elevate.
The lineage stuff?
Yes, he starts to elevate the spiritualness
Yeah.
of his relationship with her.
But what I'm curious about is which came first. Was it the relationship with her is progressing? He's increasingly spending more
Yes,
time. And
I'm
so
pretty
he's
sure.
got to come up with a reason why this is okay. Or did he say, she's my actual daughter? And then that gave him permission to proceed into that intimate
I'm pretty
type
sure
of thing.
the behavior change and the time spent together came first, because I feel like it was really cemented in flipping houses. That's when all the time alone started to originally develop.
Because she
that's
was
correct.
working with him.
And can you put any sort of
Right?
date, roughly year, on house flip?
I probably could if I looked back. I don't know off the top of my head.
Because there were a handful of them. The
Yeah.
first one was like a house out in Dardanelle.
I think the first one was the house in Morrilton.
Oh yeah, Morrilton.
Which I don't want to get like off on a side tangent about this, but that kind of sparked a memory for me. I don't even think I knew at the time, but I remember talking to Michael, my brother Michael, and then Sandy, who was on, and a couple of other people about the purpose of the house flipping. Do you remember how that came about? Because their recollection of it was that was presented, not like formally to the church, but I guess presented to members that was, we were going to use tithe and offering money to buy this house and flip it, and then that would go into the church coffers, so to speak. Is that how you understood it?
That sounds about right.
Okay.
Like, I hadn't thought much about that in a while. I do have some recollection of, I feel like there was a discussion about church money. Like, it was because he expected like church help on flipping that one.
Oh, I think that's an understatement.
Okay, understatement. And full disclosure, I didn't help on it. Maybe for like a couple hours one day or something. But yes, but I don't remember some promise of it like going to church coffers. I thought the spin was, and this is a very, very vague memory, but it's how I'm remembering it as you asked me that. Yes, something about like using some money to help like get this thing started, and then it was supposed to like roll and evolve into like benefiting everyone. Like everyone ends up getting their own flip house and making more money, and like I just remember that kind of like spreading. Like, well, next thing you know, like you're supposed to be doing one, and like he's going to get Michael in on one, and he talked to Sarah and I quite a bit, and we had seen the first couple situations, and I was like, I don't know anything about freaking contracting. Turns out neither did he. I'm sorry.
Who knew less than you did?
There's some very questionable code safety situations. But I remember thinking, like, I had my hands full trying to make a struggling gym get off the ground. And, Sarah and I were pretty newly married, and and we had seen how some stuff, I remember being intrigued by the promise of like some quick cash turnaround. And I was like, oh, that would be awesome. I was like, I don't have the skill set or the time to do it. So like, but he's like, oh, we'll pair you with like John or something. And he knows all about how to do it and this whole thing. Right. So I thought the spin was like everybody ends up getting to get a piece of the pie. I don't remember it being like, oh, the church coffers a ministry goes up, but maybe I don't remember that well.
The first one was that, and then the subsequent houses were more the individuals involved. I could be wrong about that.
No, that's probably right.
I think that's how it was. And I only bring that up and like go into a little side story about that because it's a hallmark of these kind of groups that you're getting this insane free labor.
Yes.
Which the first one in Morrilton, there were people, including my wife, who was not my wife at the time,
painting there for like, I take it back.
Like
I did show up and help
nearly
on that one.
Okay.
I remember painting with her. I remember my dog getting in the paint on the walls. I was painting. I did paint there.
But just an insane amount of free labor.
And it was a church event to show up for the open house.
Yes.
Like we're going to barbecue here and the whole thing. And it is rather bizarre when you think back on it.
So that's already, an off-kilter kind of thing that's occurring in the church. But it feels more isolated to this one thing, at least it did to me at the time. I wasn't thinking of it as a bad thing, but that just for some context for people listening.
But I think Sasha spent a lot of time on the first house, if I remember correctly.
100%.
So I think it definitely answers your question. I'm 90-something% sure there was more and more time spent together, and that relationship was, I'm not saying it's a catalyst to the movement, maybe it is, but it definitely is a factor in that.
I absolutely think it is. And just outside looking in, that makes the most sense to me, is that you want to engage in a certain type of behavior that is not only frowned upon, but considered completely inappropriate. And so what can you do? Like, as the leader of this group, how can you make this okay?
I do think it's multifaceted, though, because I can't remember if it was one of y'all's more recent previous episodes where we were talking about it. You mentioned, or we were talking about it today, him preaching and being, once again, for the 100th time, very frustrated and dissatisfied with our lack of spiritual flair and fire and sense.
I agree. Yeah, it reminds me of...
We just didn't have that flair he wanted.
Yeah. Yes, but, and I agree with that. He was dissatisfied. He wanted glory, he wanted to make a mark, and I get that. But it could have been any number of ways that did not involve heavy petting.
Well, but see, you're right. But I still think it's pretty multifaceted, that the heavy petting stuff came, and that's not an overstatement. Let's just say that. Mm-hmm. That came like towards the end, middle end, like not end, but it's the movement. So now we're progressing here then. So the movement started, by my recollection, it was well before the feast in 2019. It was a few months before that. I remember the first moment, like everything was like something big is happening, which was exciting at the time. I remember being excited. I'm ashamed to say it now, but this was a big deal because I moved my entire life, started like my adult life, like from scratch here in Russellville, Arkansas, for your dad and his leadership in this spiritual arena of like, we worship the Lord in spirit and truth. And I was young, so like the boring worldwide living Church of God vibe with 3 hymns and like we've got the angle on what the truth actually is in the Bible. I've heard that my whole life, so like I'm bought in, but it also kind of sucks. Like there's no one but elderly people in this congregation and there's 20 to 30 of them. And, you know, if you're young and you care at all about a social life, but you're not supposed to socialize with the world, you know, I mean, how you ever gonna have any friends? You're ever gonna date, meet someone? Like, I mean, that's why the feast was exciting, right? It's like, and that's how we meet Crusade Church, is at the feast. So, you know, I uproot my whole life, like bought in hook, line, and sinker on the charismatic, sensationalist, fiery worship and hearing directly from the Lord. I'm showing up for this. Yeah, so I spent those couple of years, like from when we were introduced to Crusade Church in 2006 to 2008, going into 2009 when I moved, devouring not every sermon on the website, but specifically the ones about pursuing the presence of God and worship and praise and spiritual experiences, which is actually a scripture, believe it or not, that says, be wary of the person that pursues these things and makes a big deal out of them, which I found as we were exiting, ironically. So it's a big deal for me because I've been beating myself up for years that I'm not experiencing a lot of this stuff that I've heard here preached and that he's experiencing during worship, or that I've heard others, right? And all of these grand testimonies about the presence of God pretty much happened from after you left from 2001. Once we get Ashley out, I'm sorry, that's not funny. It's hurtful.
No, it's I'm far removed from this, so
after
laugh
Ashley,
away.
So from 2001 to 2004-ish, I know that was the era with Brother Joseph and prophecies and the feast at Yorktown, Powder Fork, something York.
Yeah, Yorktown, I think, was 2000 or 2001. I get them mixed up, but yeah, that was like the big special feast.
Sometime we'll have to do an episode on the feast in Yorktown. Like he was talking about people, teenagers that like never before cared about God at all, like worshiping all hours of the night until they miss all their sleep and they're laying out in the middle of the road where cars could drive over them and they don't even care. And Arlene's got the joy of the Lord and she starts hopping and she looks like Tigger, but bouncing up and down, like, and she can't stop. Joy of the Lord bouncing all the way through the camp.
Is this good that you're laying in the road?
Oh, it's amazing. It's like you're slain in the spirit. You're struck.
This is a precursor to Love Move, not in the type of things that were happening, but like here's God's doing this special thing here in this place. That was one of those moments.
It's important to speak on because this is a legacy through the church.
Yes.
of remembering, and it's directly related to me buying into the movement at first. It was such a huge, constant reoccurrence, and a message is that, like, this is what we're about. This is what we're after. I mean, obviously we're about the truth and keeping the Sabbath and holding the standard and all of these things. But like Crusade Church was special because we're the only people that believe in the truth of the Sabbath and the holy days and the food laws. It's kind of the one thing that the three things that we believe in that most churches don't, and the rest of the 10 Commandments, but also like pursuing the presence of God. And that comes with it all of the magic. And that's enticing to people. And like to this day, I'm still trying to make sense of, well, what the hell was happening? I mean, seriously, because man alive, I still think there's plenty of evidence to believe in a spiritual realm. So I'm like, what's going on with people bouncing up and down and these testimonies about, some of them I think are your dad. In retrospect, I think we all are more and more aware of how good he was at, what's the word? Exaggerating, and the story grows.
And when you were talking earlier, I think another word too to go along with the exaggeration is he romanticized that time for decades after so heavily, like hearkening back to like, look at what was happening here and what Brother Joseph and the other African brothers had prophecies about what was going to happen here. So that was a constant thing in messages like this happened and it's going to happen more.
Well, see, that's a really interesting point that maybe we don't need to go all way off down deep into, but I feel like this stuff, it ties in, is I never met Brother Joseph. Mm-hmm. You did. Like I know Sarah like felt like he was dear to her, right? But, and I'm just theorizing here. So what it's like with some of these other cultures, like in Africa, where Brother Joseph was from, or India, where there's, I don't know, a looser hold on like, yeah, you just speak that prophecy, man. Like you're just like saying nice things to the Westerner a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, I really don't know. Like, I don't know these guys, but now it occurred to me in this moment, like I'm wondering, like, is any of it real?
Yeah.
You know, like,
Is that just a cultural difference
could it
that
be?
we were experiencing?
You know, and then it really struck that chord with narcissism, like ego situation, where it's like, yes. And then you take it and run with it. And then like me coming in, you know, 6-7 years after that, like hearing it romanticized and looked back on, it's like, you're just taking this, like, this is a respectable man from the church with the truth. Like, so like you have no reason to question that maybe this isn't entirely accurate. And how accurate is it at this point?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
like,
this-
I don't know.
And this is not just an indictment of Dad. People are like this, what I'm about to describe. But again, like I feel like it's important just for context for people to understand as much as they reasonably can with our story. But there were examples, I'll give one, and there were many more like this, where there was a supposed healing at the feast. There was a woman who had a broken foot, it was a fractured foot in a boot. That over the years,
Shattered foot.
yes, literally morphed into like, oh, her foot was shattered. And we've joked since, like, her foot was just a mangled mess of bone fragments. Like
I know.
because the
How
funny
about-
part about that is that that's not that far off of where how those stories with Dad in particular
And you're right.
morphed.
Like lots of people like have the fishing story where the fish that grows every time you tell
That's
it.
what
Like,
people do.
It's a thing. But just devil's advocate here, because I really do think through this stuff and like it blows my mind. You were there for a 2-year-old girl that Sarah brings into the church. Is it a visible tumor on the back of her neck? Did you see it?
I was going to say funny enough. Maybe it's not funny. I missed that because I was in my 40 days and 40 nights of isolation
That's
when
not
that
funny
occurred.
at all, but it is.
Yeah, so I actually
How
didn't get
ironic
to see,
is the word. It's not
Yeah,
funny at all.
yeah.
So you it's not funny.
I met the first time that she was brought, but I was not there for the supposed healing.
I got to ask
So-
Sarah about it because I'm pretty sure it was visible,
Okay.
right? So I thought so. Thought it was external. You could see it. But I wasn't there. So what I'm getting at then is I come in like really with my teeth sunk into this concept of having a more real, alive experience with God than you're raised in the Worldwide Church of God, where it's just very dry and factual. And so when he's hearkening back to these times of this great spiritual move and these prophecies over this church and how special it is, like now something big is happening and it seems really exciting. And so like I think Sandy spoke to this past couple episodes with like, you don't want to be the person that's not on fire too.
Right.
You know, you don't want to miss out, especially in like a small or big, but like this group dynamic where like you're literally feeling ashamed if you have a different opinion than like the two people standing next to you about what movie you like. Like this literally came up for me this week. I realized that I really love this certain song. And I told Sarah, I was like, I can remember chatting about liking this type of music and someone being like, type of music stupid, I hate it. And then feeling like my opinion was wrong.
Ooh.
And I'm like, but that's so messed up. Like a cult mind frame was like, now it's like, I've got, a few guys that work with me. I was like, if I'm in the truck working with them and this song comes on and I say I like it and they say they don't care about it, that doesn't bother me at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like I still love it. And that's perfectly fine. And it's fine for you not to like it. Why is that so weird? So like Sandy was saying, you don't want to be the person that's not struck with this fire. You don't want to be on the outside. Like more than the being left out, feel of that, there's a legitimate, like we're all, pretty purely motivated to want to pursue God and like who he is and what he has to offer and this whole relationship. And so you've heard it taught what that should look like and how amazing that is. And so you genuinely want that. And if that looks like the fruits of the Spirit being poured out, you want it. You want it pretty bad. And then he's leading, he's the standard, and he's got it in spades. Like, I got to get to some level, where I'm hearing what he's hearing and feeling what he's feeling. That sounds weird.
But the
fitting.
brain
It is
so complex. And I think we underestimate what we are able to make happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of a better way to put that.
I know.
But if you want something bad enough, sometimes you can interpret what's happening as the thing that you're asking for.
And there's like the domino effect of like I'm feeling your vibe, and it's like, yeah, let's go. Like, and it has.
Well, I mean, I went to a Tony Robbins conference like a year or more ago. A lot of what we did there would fall under the category of cult tactics.
I know.
I'm not saying he's a cult leader. I did get some things out of that
it has
conference.
That feel though,
yeah,
like
but
the swelling, like energy, like whip everybody into this frenzy type of thing. Happens at rock concerts with mosh pits.
Yes, exactly.
Like, I remember being a teenager, like going to these Christian rock concerts was okay. It was Christian rock. Actually, my dad wasn't a fan, but it's not bannable. And like the music and the lights and just the energy, and then like somebody bumps into somebody and you're dancing around.
Oh,
and then, like there's like a fight that's called a mosh pit. And it's just this frenzy, like it's bizarre.
Oh, yeah. At the conference, I mean, for one thing, the temperature was extremely cold in the room to keep us all alert. But I had to like leave the conference and go buy a coat. So did my friend. I could not feel my toes. So super cold and thousands of people there. And these were like 14-hour days. And so, we're starting in the morning, and then we're doing like a fire walk at like 2 a.m. And then we have to be back there at 8 a.m. or something like that. And
that's very similar to our feasts.
Yeah,
I'm saying we were up late and then like starting.
It's exhausting. So you're already like in this place of like sleep deprivation, and then there was a lot of music, and it was all, power of the crowd. Like they're working you into a frenzy. Like you're literally like yelling out, and all of this stuff and jumping up and down and all of that. And there were people who were having these moments, where they feel like they're getting an epiphany about their life or whatever, and they're crying, and it's a whole thing. And so I'm just like, yeah, this is similar to what happens in certain groups, certain churches, concerts, like you said. I think there's psychology there.
I think there definitely can be. Absolutely. The movement, right? So I remember primed to want something like this to be really exciting, to be actually happening, to be really true, and to be a part of it. And so I remember like every Friday night worship service, like you really are kind of hoping and expecting that you're going to hear something, like it's going to be a more intense, real experience. You're not just going to go through the motions, which is heavily frowned upon, And so I remember this Friday night worship, I think it was probably midsummer. So a few months before that feast in 2019, somehow he got everybody up towards the stage. A lot of people were on the stage. And he was pacing around like on fire, going on and on about new revelation. And I think, Matt, you mentioned earlier, I think David might have mentioned this in his episode too, fairly recently preceding this probably was when there was that sermon. It wasn't at the feast. It was the sermon about...
Yeah, this was back at home before pre-feast. Yeah.
And it would have been pre-this, not pre-feast, but pre-midsummer of 2019. There's a sermon about just like, I don't even know if I can be a pastor, like all these prophecies and like we're just super disappointing with our level of spiritual fire at this point. Yet again, this has happened a lot where either God loves us intensely and passionately and the most, or we're very disappointing because we're not cutting it. We're not where we're supposed to be here spiritually. So he is pacing around on the stage, like yelling, I think. Like it was intense. And some new revelation where God's now telling him that the devil has asked to kill him, like with Job. Like he's as important as Job, the whole book of the Bible written about him. God has given the devil permission to try to kill your dad. And
If he can.
If he can.
Yeah, if he can.
You're right. That's a good point because like your dad's too good to kill.
Yeah.
Well, let's be honest.
Yeah.
He ain't
That's pretty
scared.
tough.
He ain't scared of no demons. Like
Yeah.
I whip demons' ass.
Mm-hmm.
But he also has the story about how one time he got too cocky. How does he tell this one? With like,
Oh, which one was that?
no, it's where God let the devil like come at him and hold him down on the couch by
Yeah.
his throat and like breathe into his face for an hour or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
You don't know that one either? You're missing so much good
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
There's so much content here.
This is why you should have let Dad tell you all about the love move when he
Oh
offered,
my
okay?
God.
So
I guess I still can. Here, let me message him.
So he is, if you come crawling back on your hands and knees, he'd be happy to have you back.
Potentially. He does love me forever and always.
Infinity.
Cow emoji, infinity symbol,
The cow.
fire, heart.
So he's going on and on about how intense this fight's going to be. And like, if the devil can kill him, God's given him permission to try. But God told him, he made me the reckoning. And I'm just like Muhammad Ali with the rope-a-dope. And the devil's going to get me. He's coming at me. He's coming at me hard. So
I need to back up
for
about the Satan held him down on the couch and breathed in his face for an hour.
So your dad got too cocky with his power over demons and casting them out and stuff. And he said something like, I kicked the devil's ass or something. And then the Lord let him know, like, you went too far. Like even Michael, the archangel, doesn't speak railing accusation against the devil. And so he gave the devil authority to come in 2:00 in the morning when your dad's staying up by himself and hold him down on the couch and like felt him like breathing into his face and like he's paralyzed, couldn't move, until he let him up. And he's like, okay, devil still got some power. He was humbled, which I don't understand how the narcissist in you is cool with showing some humbling. I don't know. But so the devil's been granted permission to try to kill him. And God's told him, though, he's Muhammad Ali.
This is probably sleep paralysis or something.
Probably. You can't get off of this one.
I'm sorry,
This is
but that's like so
now,
outrageous.
Now he's Muhammad Ali.
Now he's
see, that's an old story to me. I've heard that one so many times.
Okay,
I'm like,
I've never heard that before.
Now he's the greatest boxer, arguably, of all time. So carry on.
going toe to toe with the devil, the lion.
Yeah.
So God's given him this revelation that he's like Muhammad Ali, where the devil's going to have him on the ropes, but then he's got the rope-a-dope, and he's coming to take the devil out. And I'm pretty sure verbatim said, "But I'm going to kill the devil." Like he told me, I'm the reckoning. And so it was this big, fiery thing with this worship service, and it was intense. I don't remember if much more happened with that service because that went on for a while. Like that was a long monologue he had.
And what was
service.
your initial reaction to that?
Well,
You loved it.
I loved it. To be honest, I thought it was freaking awesome.
Yeah.
I was like, I did. I wish that weren't true. But yeah, honest response is I thought this is fantastic. Like we're finally going to see some stuff go down here.
Fight of the ages.
Yes. Well, look, that was a thing too. It's like we were God's special forces, quote, end quote, verbatim. We're like the Navy SEALs of the Lord. And as
Episode title.
Navy SEALs of the
I still
Lord.
think it needs to be rope-a-dope.
So many options.
Rope-a-dope is so fun to say.
Did he describe, and was this all like really abstract, or did he describe how this fight was going to go down? Was it spiritual warfare in his head, or was this going to be like an actual physical altercation that the rest of the congregation was going to witness? Like, I'm curious what he meant.
It was fairly abstract.
Okay.
Like, we don't have some actual physical description of what an altercation is going to look like that we're all going to get to witness. It was very, like the prophecies that are like, something's going to happen and the time when it's going to be cool. And like you throw out, or like the psychic that's throwing out, like, I think there's somebody with an F in your life that had a pet die, like you're throwing out things that can land. So his telling of this is abstract, right? Like, it's very mysterious. Like, we don't know how or when. Yeah, no. He specifically is saying we don't know how or when.
And I think the point of the rope-a-dope part was that it looks like you're losing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. He said that.
Yeah, so that's kind of like the vibe of it, is like, it looks like we're about to or I'm about to lose, but actually it's a tactic. The devil's going to lose.
Yep. And then fast forward through the whole movement to COVID happening, I learned later that the reason, again, his behavior changed off the rails like I'd never seen before, because we were very not name it and claim it, but act as if faith heavy on healing and power and stuff like this. COVID hits, and like, he is so uncharacteristically afraid now. Like, he's like laying down rules for us, like berating us on church Facebook page anyway, I learned later that he's afraid that that's it. Like, devil's going to use COVID to kill him. So he became ultra paranoid about COVID.
But I know we talked about this before, but it's still nonsensical to me, because if he has been told by God that he will actually defeat the devil, then why is he concerned about COVID?
Well, Matt, if you want to read the messages,
and Satan using COVID to kill him.
If you want to read the messages, I'm pretty sure he was still leaving it as if he could lose. He had the potential to lose.
Okay.
But again, there's always with this shifting standard and this like, you can't get an accurate read on what's going on. Like, anything could be true. Through the whole movement, it's like this fire, this intense fire that cannot be quenched. Nothing can put it out. And then later it's like, you all put it out. It's always this like, so like, I can't be killed. Like, I'm going to get the devil, but then like, I've got to have faith. Like, the weapon that I'm going to use, it's in one of those messages you showed me earlier.
It's faith.
The weapon that the Lord has given me to kill the devil with is faith. So if my faith, pray for me that my faith is strong enough.
Right.
And so there is this, I'm invincible, but I'm weak. And, as the whole thing progressed, like through the movement, some of the stuff becomes more intense and elaborated on. And the whole thing's expounding and evolving, and there's constant messaging, being written out. And he's writing a book or journal, or he's dictating to your mom about everything he's hearing from the Lord.
Which I've seen, by the way, with my own two eyes.
I'd love to see it. No, I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
And so at some point, then he's expounding on that, where he probably actually is going to die. But then he will defeat the devil by coming back. That's the rope-a-dope. He's going to die, and the devil thinks he's got him, which is great, because this is what happens on the cross with Jesus. And so you're elevating yourself to this savior level, which is a common thing that happens, by the way, in cults, is there's very pretty frequent, you've got a leader that will end up being like, well, no, I'm not just the prophet. Like, I'm kind of like the second coming of Jesus. So he's evolving this story to where he actually is going to die. And the devil thinks that he's got him. But the rope-a-dope is resurrection, and then I take the devil out.
Well, and as a tie-in to the resurrection, the dying and the resurrection thing, I don't have, as far as I know, I've got tons of stuff that Dad, had these supposed revelations from God and visions that he sent to the family. I've got years of that in the transcript that I can search. I haven't found this yet, so I don't know that I have this in writing. anywhere, but as I recall it, he was kind of telling the story, at least of the possibility that if he were to be killed by the devil, that he would be dead for 3.5, or 3 days, 3 nights, whatever it was, and be resurrected by this person that we've talked about, this single mom that we were calling Sasha. So again, that's another tie-in. Like, she was always a big part, especially at the end of his stories of like these amazing things that were gonna
She was
happen.
at the end, but at the beginning too. And with him saying that about resurrecting him, that must directly correlate to, there was also this thing about, we were all guardians of purity. Like, this goes hand in hand with the cloak of humility stuff.
Yes.
We were also guardians of purity, which was fascinating because things were becoming less and less pure by the moment. And so,
Which
like,
I think that's why that was introduced, is like, yeah, I know things are getting kind of out of hand. So now here's this new abstract
concept,
doctrine and
like,
concept.
We actually are what purity is. Therefore, there's no such thing as impurity with us. And if something looks off, don't worry about the appearance. Like, if it's uncomfortable, just roll with it. It's right. It's love.
If you like this episode of The Cult Next Door, please leave us a positive review and rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And don't forget to subscribe to be notified of new episodes.